Hello, I'm Sean, I'm from the Centre for Linkage with James over here. So we're just going to give a bit of a talk basically about our work so far in privacy preserving record linkage. Just kind of a general background about what we've been doing on this topic. So part of that it will be about implementation, so we have done some projects with real data using privacy preserving linkage. So I guess in our work on this topic, we've kind of got an overarching research aim, which is developing these practical methods for PPRL for real-world use. So probably pretty similar to what everyone's doing, I guess, but for us, because we're a bit more on the front line in that sense, we do linkage. We've got to make sure that it's practical, we can actually do it. So that's where, I guess, our slight shift in focus maybe to other people. So who are we? As Chris Randall discussed, we're part of the Population Health Research Network. So what do? We carry out record linkage, plain text record linkage with real identifiers for different clients. We also provide advice to the different linkage units around the country, technical advice and support, and we do some research and develop technology in this space, basically. So yeah, PPRL is one of the things that we do. So we operate within this health context, so the solutions that we're interested in are for that context. They may not be useful for other situations, but they solve our problems. I want to talk a little bit about what those requirements are for us, for a privacy preserving model, what we need to be able to do this work. The most important thing is we need a method that uses an independent party. So in the health context, health data custodians, people that own hospital separations and they manage those collections, they're not interested in linkage, they don't have the technical expertise. We're lucky if they let us do the work for research, basically. So we have to make their lives as easy as possible, make it as simple as possible, and we have to help them give us the data and do the work. So there's different privacy preserving models. Sometimes they're these kind of two parties or multi-party where they kind of pass identifiers back and forth a few times and that sort of stuff, and they're a bit more complicated and they have to do more work. Those models aren't really useful in our scenario because the data custodians aren't going to be able to do that. We have to give them something very simple, a little program that they can encode the data and send it to us, and that's basically it, really. We can't really rely on them to do, we want to make it as easy as possible. The other thing I should mention is that we are typical service researchers, where we link data to give it the content data to researchers to do a project. Typically, that will involve, might involve 5 different data collections or 10 different data collections. So we have to have methods that are capable of handling not just 2 data sets, as the little play examples we often talk about. Just there's two data custodians and there's one provider and things like that. The most important thing for us is linkage quality. So linkage units around the country spend an awful amount of effort and time to try and maximise linkage quality. So we need a privacy preserving method where that's optimal. And that's the most important out of the privacy and efficiency. That linkage quality is where we put our focus, because people do spend so much effort on that area, and we think it is important. Efficiency is the least important for us. For us, efficiency is almost binary. It's either fast enough or it's not fast enough. Whether it gets a little bit faster isn't that important. Privacy is an interesting one. So I guess there's a big range of, we can kind of quantify privacy on some sort of scale. At the one end, you've got sort of your cryptographic security sort of thing, your provably secure stuff we talked about this morning. That's what we'd like to be as far along towards that end as possible. At the other end, you've got your legal definition of security. So in Australia, we deal with personally identifying information. If you encode that even in a very poor way, but it's considered encoded such that a reasonable person wouldn't be able to break it, that's not considered personally identifying information anymore. So that's a very low level. So that's at one end. This is the cryptographic at the other end. Bloom filters, which is the method that we'll be using and talking about, and basically what everyone else here is talking about. They're obviously somewhere in the middle. And I guess, we'd like to be over that end, but we've got this trade-off with linkage quality, and that's, where we kind of work out where we want to be, I guess. So that's just basically talking about that sort of idea. So the model we've gone for is all the data custodians encode their data, they send it to the independent party, the linkage unit, who then carries out the linkage, which is the same as most people here seem to be talking about. So we're using privacy preserving linkage using Bloom filters. We're using field level Bloom filters, we're not using clicks. That's basically for quality reasons. We've discussed some of the security implications about that. We're basically just happy to wear that because our custodians know, we explain what this method can do, and we just go from there. So we take that high quality. And we did some evaluation earlier on that basically showed with using field level Bloom filters, we can get equal quality to what we can get with plain text. So that, when we did that first work, that was using, I guess, parameters which were basically we could use. And one of the big challenges is how to get those parameters when when you've only got the encoded data. So that work was important because it said that, look, if you can get the right parameters, you can do this as well as you can with plain text. But another important question is how do you find those parameters? Because if it's not really clear that we can actually do that, then this method may not be useful at all. So there's lots of practical challenges, and I'm not going to have answers for everything. I think everyone is kind of hoping that because we've done this in practice that we're going to be able to tell you how to do it. But I don't know if that's, you may want to be disappointed. So some of the practical challenges in terms of getting this to work. So we've got the management of keys. So obviously the data providers all have to share a secret key. There has to be, it can't just be a word or something. It has to be a proper strong key, and they have to share it. So do we need some sort of key management, something like that? We need to validate privacy preserved data sets. So what happens if one data provider puts the first name and the surname around the wrong way? We'll never know. The results will be terrible. How do we manage these sort of situations? How do we handle these issues? So basically, to do that, we're going to have to provide some tools likely. So we have to, so our question is how are we going to encode the Bloom filters? Again, it's back to parameterization. There's a huge number of different possibilities, different parameters to look at, the number of hashes, hash keys, the length. We need to have a consistent approach between each data provider. If we're doing clicks, the number of fields that we're actually going to add in, which fields. This all depends on the data characteristics, but we don't actually get to see those characteristics, so we have to have a look at them. So there's some challenges around that. And some of the key challenges are to estimate those weights and those thresholds that we typically use for linkage, because they are so vital for the way typical record linkage works. Those parameters make or break. You can get the terrible linkage or you can get perfect linkage just by changing the parameters. So being able to estimate those parameters without being able to see the data is vital, essentially. So threshold estimation, again, in most linkage units working with plain text identifiers that they can see, they choose a threshold by looking at handfuls of record pairs and deciding where it looks right. We can't do that. We also need to be able to calculate some sort of weight curves because we're using different approximate methods. We're using dice coefficient. That's not the same as Jarrah-Wimker or things like that. We can't treat them the same. We have to recalculate things. And we can't do any sort of quality assurance because we don't have the numbers. So we can't see anything. We can't do manual review, can't do clerical review. We can't check that we've got the right answers often. So look, it's not easy, and there are some things that we can do. So we use the EM algorithm. We can do that because we've got field level Bloom filters, so we can treat them as individual variables as we would with plain text. So we've done some evaluation on that. It does work. When it works well, but sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it just gives us an answer. That is normally when it doesn't work, we know. We can say, well, that's not right. That weight is obviously wrong. Something's gone wrong. But we still don't have the right answer. So all we've got to rely on then is heuristics, what we've used previously, things like that. So that is a big challenge for us at the moment. I think just having something we've got a method that works, but it doesn't always work. And we need to have something that always works if we're going to be able to really push this out. So what we provide, so when we've carried out this a few times, so we have a tool that we provide to data custodians, you know, a little GUI sort of thing that they can put their data set in, and it's got all the parameters set up in there. It comes with a little parameter file that we give them and say, use this, and you know, you work out your secret key amongst the cells and stick it in and encode the data. And that comes back to us with some metadata, basically about the metadata about the fields, about what they've done to make sure that they've done the right thing, etc. So we've got some sort of an audit trail, I guess, essentially. We've tried to build that in to try and solve some of these issues of what if they put the wrong fields in the wrong place, things like that. In terms of quality assurance, we haven't really done too much here. We don't know how much there is to do. We've done a little bit of looking at how we can use the pair information. So I should mention that when we do linkage, we're often looking at many-to-many. So we might be looking at a hospital collection where there's someone comes to hospital many times to GP data, where someone coming to a GP many times. So it's not this sort of one-to-one relationship always. Sometimes we do, and when we do, that's great because it makes linkage a lot easier and the quality a lot better. But we don't always have that. So when we don't have that, there are some things we can do to identify, or is this group of records? So that's a, you know, they're the record pairs. Is this one more likely to have an error or not? Well, if it's less saturated, it probably is more likely to have an error, things like that. So there's some things that we know we can do around there, but there's still, I guess, a bit of work there. So we have done a few projects, real-world projects. We've done one recently where we linked WA hospital data to the Medicare enrolment file using blue filters. This occurred because WA wasn't willing to give their hospital records to the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth wasn't willing to give their Medicare enrolment file to the state. So we kind of came in the middle and said, we'll do this one-off project for you so that you can do this. So that was successful. That was good. We also did another evaluation with Cheryl in New South Wales. So they had some GP data that they wanted to link to their system, but the data provider was a bit reticent to give data. So I'm going to talk about that in a second. And another project that we're working on where we're doing the linkage is it's collecting data from a bunch of different government departments in Western Australia. So it's things like social security, housing, education, juvenile justice, prisons, police records, court records, things like that, where a lot of those, some of those, not everything is privacy preserved, but a lot of those records are going to come in a privacy preserved manner. So that's one that hasn't started yet, but that's coming up in the next few months. So I'll go backwards. Talk a little bit about the work that Cheryl did. So this was interesting in the sense because we didn't do the linkage, we just kind of gave them the software. So this is basically how you do it. So it was quite a real evaluation in that we've given it to non-experts and said, do some privacy preserving linkage and see how you go. So they actually did have the identifier, so it was an evaluation. So we compared the results with plain text versus blue filters, but all the parameters were calculated, you know, as we will have to in real life. So 16 GP practices in Western Sydney were linked to Cheryl's main core database, essentially, so hospital ED mortality data. So here is a graph of some of the linkage quality for some of the different practices. So the one basically on the left, it's not great linkage quality. On the right, it's very good. And the main difference between those is that on the left, we didn't use the links that Cheryl had previously made, and on the right we did. So on the right we had essentially one record per person, and we knew that someone in that GP, most of those people in that GP records should be in this file. Whereas on the one on the left, the raw data, we just had all these records, but from Cheryl, all these hospital records, we didn't know who they belonged to either. So each GP record could link to 50 records, could link to one record, could link to 1,000 records. We didn't have any of that information to use. And when you've got that information, when you know you're going to look for one, it becomes so much easier to ensure that quality. So, and I mean, obviously in practice, this is how Cheryl or someone would use it. So when you've got that population spine, you'd use that information if you had it. So, yeah, that's basically it. So yeah, look, I think this is, I would probably, I don't know, I think we'll probably run up these results, but, whoops. Yeah, that's one of the evaluation. I think they're quite happy with it. I think they're going to continue with it where they can. I guess the aim is not to replace what's currently there, because we know that we're probably not going to be able to get as good as quality as we can with personal identifiers. It's more as a backup solution of, well, if this person is not happy to give their data to us, can we suggest, what about if we privacy preserve it? Are you happy then? You know, to kind of, we know we won't get it in good quality, but that's okay. We can still do it, which previously we haven't been able to do it. I'll just quickly talk about some of the other work that we've done. So we've done, because we're in this unusual situation where we do a bit of research, but we've also got access to real data sets, and often access to real data sets that other reputable organisations have linked, and we've got their results. So we've got a gold standard essentially. So we've done some work with other groups where they've kind of given us their algorithms, and we've run it against some of our data sets and, you know, shared the results. So we did some work on multi-bit trees with Randall and Christian Borgs, and we did a bit of work with Peter Christian's team. And look at the result. I think there's a couple of papers there that published. There might be some more. I don't know. I think they're the only ones with our names on them. But I think the results were okay. They probably weren't as good as we hoped. The multi-bit tree stuff, I think, was a little bit slower than we would have liked. And the matching protocols, I think the quality probably wasn't as good as we'd like. But I think it's an interesting process. And I think it's one of the challenges for a lot of people that don't have access to real data is that, it's different. It's hard. A lot of the synthetic data out there doesn't really approximate some of those things. You can't get a good feel. You know, I think it's a shame that we are in this sort of situation where most of the researchers don't have access to the things they need to be able to really do the work that would help the people that are doing it in practice. So we've also done some work on looking at alternate protocols for bloom filters. I've already done a little bit here, but I thought I'd include it because it's probably of interest to some people. So basically, the bloom filter methods that we use have great quality, but they have some privacy issues, you know, or quite possibly. It seems like they, you know, we've talked about the attacks earlier. So we kind of had a research question: can we get similar quality but improve the privacy? So we did. There's two protocols I'll talk quickly about. So the first one was using homomorphic encryption. So it was essentially just taking a click, essentially wrapping it up in some homomorphic encryption, and then carrying out the linkage. So we're able to do this reasonably. I'll just quickly. So obviously, I should say the linkage quality will be the same as you get from a click, because it's just a bit of security wrapped around it. It's not actually changing anything. So the model with the homomorphic encryption, which is one of the, I guess, the weaknesses, is that you need two independent third parties. So you have your data custodians at the top here. They send their data to the linker, who does the linkage, and then the linker can't decrypt the results. The results have to be sent to someone else to decrypt. So that the results in that sense are pairs and a score, which the linker doesn't know what the score is. So they have to get sent to a second person. So it's quite cumbersome in that sense. The speed, it was reasonably fast, but not fast enough, basically. So we can do about 30 milliseconds per record pair comparison. That's just one core sort of thing, one process. But that's okay if it's small, if it's under 1 million records, that's fine. But when it gets bigger, yeah, that's probably going to be too slow for anything else. So this, I don't know if this avenue, maybe in the future it will be more suitable, but yeah, it's an interesting process anyway. So the second approach we looked at was, look, the attacks on bloom filters are to do with its ability to do approximate string matching. That's why they have these attacks, because basically if you're comparing if you've got a name, there's frequency information in those qgrams or whatever that you're using. That frequency information has to, in some sense, be in the bloom filters when you compare them, because otherwise you can't compare. Otherwise, it's not going to compare. That's how it works. So can we? So what happens? Let's have a scenario. What happens if we just forget about that approximate string matching? Can we do something else what's another process that we can use? Can we still get decent quality? Because there's many other methods that give good linkage quality. So the other things are the weighting, which is very important, and being able to handle missing values. So I guess I would say there's three things for linkage quality. The other one is the approximate string matching. So what happens if we remove that? How good can we get? So we just met up with this little protocol. It's very simple. It's basically like having a stack of SLKs. And those SLKs are generated based on a standard probabilistic approach. So in probabilistic linkage, we give each variable weights, and then we say, and then we essentially give them all a score that they would get. If this one agrees and this one agrees and this one agrees, and the score, we set a threshold. So we can basically take everything above the threshold, all the possible combinations of fields, and then everything that agrees we can kind of just hash together, and we end up with a stack of hashes. And we can just compare them, just do exact match on them. So that kind of that basically handles all the weights, handles all the missing values essentially. So the idea is that it tries to replicate what probabilistic linkage would. It essentially does replicate probabilistic linkage without any sort of approximate matching. But it does so by using by just basic hashes. So the idea, it does give some security because each hash directly represents a person. So a hash isn't of a surname, a hash is of 3 or 4 combinations of identifiers that we've said identify a person. So in that sense, it doesn't seem clear, at least to me, that would be able to break that, because I can't say, all I can say is that this person was in my data set 10 times, or this person was in my data set 1 time. I can't really get any more information about that. But I'd be interested in people's thoughts. The other thing with this method, because it's just exact matching, is you don't need to block, so that issue's kind of gone out of the way. So I should mention previously, with our other Bloom filter, our typical Bloom filter approach, we're just doing standard traditional blocking, that we just hash a value or block on some of those fields that we've already used, which you probably guessed. So I'll have a look at some results that we've got from some real-world data sets. So the first thing, there's quite a few little things here. I don't know, can you see my cursor? No. The first thing to look at probably is, I've got here the two, we can compare what we get using plain text data, the results using exact matching and approximate matching. So that's this two here, and this two here, and this two here, and this two here. So basically, at least on these 4 data sets, there's reasonably little difference. There isn't a little extra that's added by using approximate string matching. And that's because some of these other techniques, being able to handle missing values, being able to handle weights, kind of take away, already handle a lot of those errors. So even if you've got, you know, two pairs of records with a misspelling or a couple of misspellings, they'll already be brought together because they're brought together on the other fields. So it doesn't actually affect the quality. The other thing to note, so there's quite a few comparisons here, but the field level Bloom filters which we use do achieve better quality than our method, than this multiple match key method, this hashing method. But the results are a bit closer when it comes to record level Bloom filters, the old clicks. I call them record level Bloom filters, but they're clicks. So I don't really do the difference. But so look, I guess the quality there is quite similar, if not better, quite often. So the issue with clicks is that though they do handle the approximate matching, its ability to handle that sort of fine-grained weighting is reasonably poor, problematic, and the ability to handle missing values is problematic. So I guess it's almost a trade-off. It'll depend on what is in your data set and how dirty it is and in what way it's dirty, probably in terms of which would perform better. Obviously, if you had something that's, say, OCR data, where it's kind of been scanned in and it looks like rubbish and it's full of typos, then this method's going to be very poor. So yeah. That's it. Any questions?
Yeah, just on that last one, when you say the ability to handle the weighting within a composite Bloom filter, you're talking about weighting per field or more information than that being weighted in, like, different weights applied for different entities, or like one weight for a particular field?
Oh, well, field-based weights. Yeah, so clicks can handle it.
Can handle it.
They can, but the way they handle it is less sophisticated, and It's probably almost easier for a drawer, but the way it's handled in probabilistic linkage is quite narrow. So we would say, you know, if something agrees, we might only give it a little bit of a weight, but if it disagrees, we give it -10 or -20 or something like that. It's sort of this sort of, and if it's not there, we'd say 0. Or for another field, you might give it 10, and then it's kind of, it's more fine-grained, I guess.
Yeah.
And it seems to make quite a difference.
Just a scalar.
Not just one field. So, and that process actually does seem to matter. That's why I think that we haven't been able to get as good quality with clicks, if you don't have that level of fine grain. It's not something that, maybe there is a way to do it, way to weight it, that we can get that. But I guess in this evaluation, I actually put in quite a bit of effort, especially with clicks, because I wanted it to be quite a robust method. I'm not trying to make a straw man or prove my method's better sort of thing. So I tested a few different ways, but I also didn't want to kind of invent a new way of doing clicks, because then it's like, well, yeah, you know. So for that clicks, I should say, I added address and then found the results were worse. I took out address, and there was middle names in there for a bit, but that's full of missing values that actually made quality worse. And I took it out. So it was a little bit of playing around just to get these results, which are still good, and obviously they're better than the SLK.
First, a quick comment. I'm happy to report that an update to your PPRL with homomorphic encryption thing will be in my talk later this afternoon. A little plug. The second thing was you mentioned efficiency on 2 occasions, which is something close to my heart. So you mentioned that efficiency was kind of a binary thing for you, and it's sort of like it's either fast enough or it's not. And you also mentioned that in the multi-bit tree thing where your comment was that it didn't seem to be fast enough to be practical. So could you make some comments about what is fast enough, roughly speaking? I know it's going to be problem dependent to some extent in how patient people are, and also specifically in the multi-bit tree case, how slow was it, and what would your threshold for acceptability would have been?
Sure. So basically, we operate on a batch process. So I don't think I don't feel like we need it to be particularly fast. Like if something takes a day or 2 days to run, that's fine, really. Especially if it's large. If it's something small, well then we're kind of going, well, what's going on? Large, sorry, yeah. So 20 million dedupe, 20 million by 20 million takes a few days. That's fine. That's kind of expected.
Yeah.
That's we'd prefer it to maybe be a little bit faster. But like if it took like a week, we'd probably go, well, that's you know, we don't really have a week because maybe we made an error, maybe we have to go and do it again. That's another week goes by, and you know. So I think I don't know. I guess it's, you know, there's a line somewhere, but it's not particularly fast. I don't feel what we need. You know, we're kind of looking just to do something in 12 hours or a day or something like that is generally probably fine. And after that, people might go, well, I don't know if it's fast enough or something like that. So
I guess a fair comment. Overnight is like fast enough.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're operating on batch processes. We're doing projects. It's not kind of a transactional, you know, every 3 hours sort of system. That's not what we do basically. So we've got a lot more laxity in that sense. But I can't quite remember. I think with a multi-bit tree when we did 20 million by 20 million, it was kind of pushing out to like a week or more, and it was just like I think we might have cut it off. I think we might have had to add in just some traditional blockings just to cut it down a bit. You know, add in block by year of birth or something quite large just to chunk it up because it was just taking too long.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.